Questions of Doom.
Hello and welcome back to another Questions of Doom. In this series, as ever, Mr. Soup and I will attempt to answer questions you send our way via the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address, which can be found either on our YouTube homepage or at the end of this video. Now, this question this week comes from Aaron in the United States, where he's asked a question about conflict archaeology, and this is the main reason why I'm taking the video this week rather than Mr. Soup, is because conflict archaeology is something that I am heavily interested in. So the question reads, I was wondering if you could explain the difference between battlefield archaeology and conflict archaeology. Is there really a difference, or is this simply a difference in wording between countries? Also, it appears to be a newer field, and what is the outlook for this field? Well, thank you for your question, Aaron. And to start off with, I would say, yes, there is a difference between conflict archaeology and battlefield archaeology. In fact, conflict archaeology can be seen as an umbrella that covers battlefield archaeology underneath it. Battlefield archaeology, the best way to describe it is to look at an actual site. So an example site taken from the USA here is the Little Bighorn. The Little Bighorn is an extremely good site when talking about battlefield archaeology because you are only looking at the actual battlefield. You are not looking at the circumstances that led up to the battle. You are not looking at the circumstances after the battle or the implications it had. These things would get a mention in research, but if somebody was to basically do just an archaeological report on the area where the battle took place, that constitutes battlefield archaeology. Whereas if you were to look into conflict archaeology, what you will find is an archaeologist would look more into things such as the reasons for the war or the reasons for the conflict. They would look into munitions. They would look into how the different sides were supplied. They would look into the different tactics that were employed. These kind of things are a lot more involved than just going out and looking at a battlefield. Now, there are a few differences of opinions as well within conflict archaeology, in the sense that battlefield is somewhat of a term that's not used too often anymore because it's not too academic. It's not too it's not the smartest way to talk about conflict archaeology. Some people will cover battlefield archaeology within the entirety of conflict archaeology. Anyway, moving on to your second question, where is conflict archaeology going? Well, conflict archaeology is a substantiated archaeology. In fact, I think it was 2006, Tony Pollard and the University of Glasgow, come to mind, started the Conflict Archaeology magazine, or the Conflict Archaeology journal, which you can buy online. I get a subscription every year. And basically what it is a different form of archaeology that is being developed right now. It's the processes and the methods that we look at conflict sites are still developing, I think, and it is in its infancy still. Like a similar way to what maritime archaeology and industrial archaeology was during the 60s and 70s. Those things were considered to be part of archaeology still, but they weren't necessarily specializations that you could do at the time. These days, for example, at the University of Glasgow and ULC, I think, you can do classes which are specific and research which is specific to conflict archaeology. So that's how it's progressed to this stage. Now, it is a newer field, like I said, so about 2000 anywhere between 2000 to 2006, the coin was probably first termed in conflict archaeology or battlefield archaeology. So that's the kind of short history of conflict archaeology. But what we're seeing today is a huge media presence, which I think is interesting, within conflict archaeology. Now, you may actually have heard of the name Tony Pollard, or Professor Tony Pollard, because he's done numerous documentaries, as well as run his own little series called Two Men in a Trench, where he and Neil Oliver, the other archaeologist who does quite a few documentaries, including Coast and Coast Australia, basically started their media careers, I believe. So it is a media intensive side of archaeology, purely because it gets a lot more interest than other aspects of archaeology. For example, when looking for the first evidence of foraging, when we went from foraging to farming, which is academically a huge topic, but when it comes to the public, it doesn't get as much interest. Now, that then leads on to different questions, which I'll leave for another day. But I hope this answers your questions, Aaron, and thank you once again for sending them. Cheerio.